Thank you, Andre. Thank you so much for having me here. In fact, I've been working in the field of gender-responsive budgeting for almost 12 years now. And all my experience has been working with ministries of finance, Ministry of Labor and Social Policies, working at local level, working with civil society organizations, with members of parliaments. In most of my experience, I've been working in Southeast Europe, although UN Women cover, like now I'm the technical advisor for all Europe and Central Asia. At the moment, UN Women is supporting different interventions in almost more than 75 countries worldwide. Well, I don't know who picked the time to do this workshop, but it's one of the best times to do the workshop on gender-responsive budgeting. Because as you might be aware, UNEC and UN Women, it's been like all this week, we are having sub-regional and global consultation on the achievements on Beijing Plus 25. Which is quite interesting to see, and it gives us a lot of rationale why we should work more and why we are where we are when it comes to gender equality. As you know, practitioners have been talking about gender mainstreaming for quite a lot of time, but then they recognized that talking only about gender mainstreaming didn't bring the change that we wanted to see when it comes to gender equality. So the question is the budget the right place when we should start and see? Because apparently words do not bring change, but budget do. So this is why, So this is why I thought at the beginning, while I was invited to talk here, to start with a little bit of definitions, what is gender-responsive budgeting. When we present it the first time, in most of the cases, people get kind of scared and they want to run away because they think it's such a complicated thing. It's gender and budget, which usually do not go together. Then I will talk a little bit about benefits of gender-responsive budgeting based on the field experience. At local level, what are some of the challenges and opportunities, and global trends on GRB? I put it a little tree there, and I want to tell you the story. We were preparing a conference on gender-responsive budgeting, and we were hiring PR companies to give us some ideas on how we should visualize GRB. It was so hard for them to understand. And it was so hard for them to come up with something. So at the end, they said, you know, we will put a very nice tree up there with the idea that gender-responsive budgeting, it's a tool which fixes the roots. Fix the roots of inequalities and fix the roots of why gender inequalities is so huge and gender equality is coming slowly in the world. Why gender-responsive budgeting? I think I'm talking here to the converted one. But I put it few words. Addis Ababa agenda asked for, I took it exactly as it says in the action plan, transformative policy and financing action to accelerate implementation of existing commitments as it is in the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action to meet new commitments on gender equality and women's empowerment in the context of development agenda. So gender-responsive budgeting shows us that there is a lack of implementation. Oh, this is working. There is a lack of implementation on gender equality commitment. As Diane Nelson would say, budgets are not neutral. And if you want to read about gender-responsive budgeting, I would suggest you to Google Diane Nelson. It's one of the best authors on GRB. Important to take into account impact of the budget on paid and unpaid care economies, and through the gender-responsive budgeting, we have done a lot of analysis, and it shows us that when we design programs and budget, it's extremely important to see the unpaid care in the society. GRB acknowledges the interaction between budget policies and women well-being and allows us to challenge the change blindness or neutrality of macroeconomic policies and bring forth their differentiated impact. And existing patterns of gender equality means that budget affects men and women in a different way. While when we go to the meetings with different ministries of finance and we talk to them about gender budgeting, their question is, we have numbers. So we don't deal with gender. Go to the Ministry of Labor and Social Policies. They are the one which they should deal with gender. And we try to challenge this and we try to tell them, yes, you work with numbers, but these numbers have impact on the life of women and men differently because we all live different lives. So it's extremely important that from the beginning they should think that the Ministry of Finance should be the one which should own the process. And I will talk a little bit later about them. There are three main definitions which usually practitioners use when it comes to gender responsive budgeting. The first one is the definition of Council of Europe of 2015. And if you see in this definition, gender budgeting is an application of gender mainstreaming in the budgetary processes. And it's a gender-based assessment at all levels of the budget processes and restructuring revenues and expenditure. What this definition gives us is extremely important, because the message that we want to give with gender-responsive budgeting is that GRB doesn't ask for 50% budget for women and 50% budget for men, nor ask for more budget for women. It asks about restructuring revenues in a way that money goes to the one which needs them most. And here I want to bring again the slogan of SDGs, like leaving no one behind. And we know who we left behind and how we can influence these ones which were left behind through our policies and the budget processes. The second one is Stotsky. It's mostly IMF definition. If you see here, Stonsky says that GRB can be defined as an approach to budgeting that uses fiscal policy and administration to promote gender equality and girls and women empowerment and women's development. And if we see here, she put it the administration. It's a fiscal policy and administration to promote. And it brings here in the discussion that we have in the morning, what is gender-responsive budgeting? Is it political or it's technical? And I would say it's both. And as working in the field, what we found one of the challenges is that we find mostly very good technical or experts on PFM. We find very good experts on gender equality, but experts which have both are very rare. And like we are investing quite a lot as UN Women to have this kind of expertise in the world. Then we have the latest definition from OECD in 2017. Gender budgeting involves using tools, techniques, and procedures of the budget cycle in a systematic way to promote equality. So OECD talks about tools, talks about techniques and procedures. And it's been almost 20 years now that GRB came as a definition and as a concept. So I think like we do have already a lot of tools and methods which are available at the moment, and we can take and benefit from them. So what are the actors and stakeholders? As you see it in this slide, I divided them in three levels. The first one, at the national level, we have Ministry of Finance, and I want to reiterate, Ministry of Finance should be the lead one. From the experience, we saw that when the Ministry of Finance is the one which they have the buy-in and they have the leadership, all the barriers reduces much more easier. What is the role of the Ministry of Finances when we talk about gender-responsive budgeting? And I was having this discussion with one World Bank expert because he was telling me, look, Ministry of Finance makes mostly the coordination between line ministries. They decide the ceilings, but the Ministry of Finance do not own the budget of the line ministries. They own their budget, and they are the one which they should run the process. So the Ministry of Finance is the one that designed the budget laws. Ministry of Finance is the one which send out the budget circular or the budget guidelines, how the budget should be done in the next year. It's the Ministry of Finance which check if the program budgets which are brought in the Ministry of Finance are correct. So the Ministry of Finance plays a crucial role when it comes to, from the beginning, the way how program budgets are designed to the end, how they are implemented. And as we know, at least from the program budgeting, the ministries which they have program budgeting, they are the one which they agree with line ministries on the key performance indicators, which is a core element when we speak about gender-responsive budgeting. Then we have line ministries. Line ministries are extremely important as well, specifically on the line ministries when we talk about gender machineries and how they are able to do proper gender analysis and how this gender analysis is being reflected and linked later on with the objectives, with outcomes, outputs, and with the budget. Then we have Training Institute of Public Administration. In order for our interventions to be sustainable, we need to have them on board and they have to deliver. While they do, we know that there are certain courses which are mandatory for public officials to be employed in the government. Training Institute needs to offer gender and gender-responsive budgeting as one of the mandatory trainings. Then we have National Institute of Statistics, and statistics have been one of the key issues or key barriers when it comes to gender-responsive budgeting. And when I talk about statistics, it's not only about availability of data, it's about the use of the data and the literacy about the data. In most of the countries, even when the data exists, the issue is that people do not know how to read them and to read the stories beyond. And on gender-responsive budgeting, we don't count heads. It's not only about men and women. When we do gender analysis, which is the first step on gender-responsive budgeting, we want to see in the category of women and men who are the most vulnerable and who are the category which we want to focus more. Then we go to local level. As a GRP practitioner, local level is the part that I love it most, because at local level you can see immediately the impact of your work. And at local level you can immediately touch the life of people, of women and men. And I remember once I met with Diane Elson and I was telling to her, look, we are working so much at national level and we are changing this law and that law. How do I know that we are changing the life of people because that law at national level changed? And she says, Mira, you follow the money. And if you follow the money, you will see if the money is bringing the change that you want. And to follow that money at national level, it's much harder, while at local level, it's much easier. And we will talk a little bit later on local level work and what are the challenges and opportunities. While at local level, with municipalities, first of all, we need to have a buy-in of mayors, because as we say, power is extremely important and political will. If the mayor, as we have it with the Ministry of Finance, that the minister needs to agree and say, go ahead, at local level, you need to have the mayor on board. But you need to work with city councillors as well, because they are the one which at the end, they raise their hand and they vote for the budget. And the city councillors are the ones which represent the people. So they would know much better than everyone else the situation in the ground. We work with finance department and with budget management teams, which are the teams that agreed on the budget at municipal level. But on GRB, we work a lot with societal actor. We work specifically with civil society organizations at local and central level. And if you ask me what kind of work civil society can do when it comes to GRB, first of all, they can do a lot of watchdog reports. So they can be the watchdog of the government and they can see if the government is achieving what they promise. They can demand accountability and transparency, and they are the one which link the work of the government with people in the ground. Through civil society organizations, we can really make possible to identify the needs of the most vulnerable. Then women from communities, what we discovered while in our work is that in most of the cases, women are either budget illiterate or they do not link their actual daily life with the budget of the municipality. And in most of the cases, they see the budget as something that someone else needs to take care and need to work. And while they are very busy with daily life, they forgot that they can have an influence and they can really bring changes at local level in the way how the budget has been done. But in order for them to do that, they need to be more empowered. They need to have knowledge. They need to have skills. And they need to feel that, yes, their voice is heard. But on the other side, we need to work quite a lot with local governance because they need to create a space. And GRB build these bridges between people in the ground, communities, and municipalities. Then we work quite a lot with parliaments and parliamentary commissions, plus the Parliamentary Institute. Also, when the budget goes to the parliament, it's a little bit late because the budget is already set up. Again, when the budget goes to the Parliamentary Commission, there is still space for discussion and there is still space for some negotiations and changes. And at the end, like when the budget goes to the plenary session, it's more a political debate. But still, MPs can use gender-responsive budgeting while they do political debates to find out how the budget will impact the women and men's life. Then academia and gender experts. The Nobel Prize this year was given to 3 economists. And it was the first time I was so much happy. I was flying that day because in most of the case, we forget that evidence-based analysis, it's one of the most important things. And academia is the one which can make for us a lot of studies. And if we can make sure that we can support some academic research, then this will support a lot our work. People, while I'm teaching gender-responsive budgeting, ask me who is the most important and who is the one which can be in lead of gender-responsive budgeting. And there is no response to that because there is no one recipe which you can copy and paste. It depends very much on the country reality, it depends very much on the demand, it depends very much on the actual situation. But as I was saying, at least at the national level, we must have the Ministry of Finance on board. At local level, we absolutely have to work with almost all of them. And the society actors, all of them, it's like a huge puzzle when each of the actors can play a small role. On the benefits, I don't think I should talk a lot because I think you already are familiar. But one of the points is that GRB links policy and budget together, which are usually not well linked. It builds bridges with the government structure. It supports restructuring of expenditure and the impact on women and men's life. For example, there are certain studies which have been done in Turkey, in Kazakhstan. We tried in North Macedonia, how much the government benefits if they invest in infrastructure and how much the government will benefit if you invest in social care, in the care economy. And we see that the return if you invest in care economy, it's much bigger. And through the gender-responsive budgeting, you see these kind of questions which might shift completely the way how government think of investing the money. It encouraged dialogue between government and less vocal and most marginalized part of the society and participatory processes, public hearings. In fact, through gender-responsive budgeting, we talk quite a lot about participatory processes and how people can vocal their needs, and especially women, the most vulnerable one. Okay. What are some of the challenges while we work on gender-responsive budgeting? The first one is data availability and transparency. And when I say data availability, it's not about gender statistics, it's about data on the budget. In most of the cases, specifically for civil society organizations to be able to demand accountability, they need to have access on the data of the government budget, but these data should be clear, they should be readable, they should be on time, etc., etc. Because sometimes governments say, yeah, the data are online, and then when you see, you have only some figures and numbers, which is very hard to understand what they really mean. We see low or no capacity of public officials to do proper gender analysis, and this is one of the questions that most of the case Ministry of Finance ask. And they say, so is the Ministry of Finance now on charge to do gender analysis? No. This is not the duty of the Ministry of Finance. This is the duty of the ones which they prepare program budgets. Lack of coordination between departments and in the municipality, but the same at the national level. It's amazing to see how less different governments, different departments in the governments talk with each other. And with gender-responsive budgeting, we bring them together. Especially here, it's quite a lot of work which we are doing with the gender machinery. And the gender machinery get more empowered, and they get the space in the table when the budget is discussed. Capacity of gender advocates in relation to economic policies. We still see that there is quite a lot of lack when it comes to this kind of analysis. The perception that GRB is very technical and it's not a budget issue, but it's mostly a gender issue. But we have some opportunities as well. And I think I'm very positive in this part because there are many, many cases in the world today which shows that GRB can succeed at local level and it can bring the change. Political will, it's much easier to get it at local level because the mayor is more closer to people, and people usually relate the political elections with the mayor, so the mayor is much more interested to have in her or his hand tools which support him to do a better job. Local government are closer, so they can see the impact of the policies immediately. Like in many municipalities, if you see the interventions that they are having, immediately they see the result, and immediately they see the change in people's life. More impactful, especially more impactful and participatory processes can be much more easy done at local level than at the national level. Although now we are supporting several governments to include participatory processes as part of the budget law. So before the Ministry of Finance sign the budget of each line ministries, they need to have a paper when they see if what it is in the budget was consulted before. It's smaller scale at local level, and it's much more easier. And it's much easier to coordinate between the government. There are so many tools outside. I put it here only like lists, which you can find it online. One of the easiest way, or at least we use quite often, is the Debbie Badlander 5 steps approach. As you know, like SDG agenda is the key driver at the moment. And in the SDG agenda, I wanted only to focus on SDG 5C1. And the SDG 5C1, it's about proportion of countries with systematic to track and make public allocation for gender equality and women's empowerment. So for the first time, we have globally a unified agreed methodology on GRB. And this unified GRB methodology is in line as well with PEFA Secretariat module on GRB as well. There are 3 parts of this SDG 5C1. And the first one is whether policies, programs, and resources are in place. The second, if the track resource allocation is in place, the mechanism. And the third one is to make resource allocation publicly available. So what are some of the global trends at the moment? We see quite a lot of increase of countries which they are reporting voluntarily on SDGs, and SDG 5C1 it's becoming one of the indicators that they are reporting. Second, UN Women will continue to work, and this is one of our core in our thematic area of leadership and participation. Then we have PEFA gender module assessment, and this is very much welcome. OECD did a lot of GRB surveys, and they do every year expert group meeting. They have a GRB module in case that you want to read a little bit more. IMF is on board as well, and they did a global survey. They have a GRB data set in their website, and they do a lot of regional workshops on GRB. And then we have EGET, the European Institute for Gender Equality, which they are having a gender module, and they are having like quite a lot of work on GRB as well. So we follow the money on the lives of people, and this is the reason why we do GRB. And here you have few human stories, which really shows that people's life can change if you invest on GRB. And GRB is a tool which can really like make the policy work better. And here, these are some cartoons that we did while we were doing a campaign on GRB. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Am I in time?